So, hello everybody, we are live. I'm very happy to have you here. Patricia, it's always a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And Neil, always a pleasure to meet you. And we're still waiting for Gautam to join us. But maybe in the meantime, you can introduce yourself for those people who don't know you yet. And then we start talking about fungal infections from candida to mukormykosis, and of course we are starting to talk about on the microbiome, which is the most important thing in life, I think. Who wants to start?
Shall we do ladies first?
Ladies first.
Ladies
Absolutely.
first. Okay, I'm Patricia Hatherly, mother of 3 and grandmother of 6. Been working with mothers and babies for 45 years, so got a lot of experience in that very narrow focus of Candida albicans, especially in lactation and in the normal menstrual cycle of women. I have a naturopathic background as well as a homeopathic background, so for me, nutrition and diet and working with the microbiome is paramount importance. And I think it doesn't matter what strategies you use, if you don't attend to the gut and the diet, you're never going to get it sorted. So I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm Neil Dougan. I'm a consciousness healer and medical intuitive. I work in Perth, Western Australia, and I have a tremendous interest in the microbiome and particularly Candida, you were mentioning there, Patricia. In fact, I wrote a book recently on the topic of the work. So this is based on many thousands of client interviews that for people that have been struggling with fungal infections, and really trying to turn that around and turn it into an opportunity for people to collaborate and cooperate with the microbiome, including the fungal species. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody's got to talk about as well. I'm a father of 4. It's Father's Day here in Australia, so I've been with one of my sons today, and it's been really interesting. And we just before we came on camera, we were talking about the situation with lockdowns in Australia and that type of thing, and what's happening. My 3 older sons are in New Zealand, which is in a severe lockdown state, and it's certainly been interesting, the interaction between families. So we're talking about the microflora and the various species, but also the microflora in general. We're talking about families. It's families on this big scale, this sort of hive-like nature of these families. And, I'm so aware at the moment of the way in which, the human hives are actually being, not really able to function properly. And so I'm sure there'll be some interesting thoughts around all of that too. So, Marianne, I'm sorry, I've just dominated, but...
No, you did not dominate. You did give me the possibility that we start with the talk on a bit of another but very interesting topic while we are still waiting for Gautam to join in. So I always like to talk about on-the-spot things. So we have somebody here from Western Australia. We have somebody here from Eastern. You're in Eastern Australia.
Yes, in Brisbane.
Yeah. So, tell us what really is going on in Australia so that we have information besides the mass media, which don't give us the right informations that we more and more see, sadly.
Well, it's hard to find out what's going on because the media is, yes, as you say, only giving you part of it. But the reality is we are locked down, and our politicians are telling us we must wear masks and we mustn't travel, and the police are complicit in making sure that that's happening. And also, too, the army has been called in, which, of course, is an extremely unconstitutional thing to do. I mean, only the Governor-General has the right to call out the army, but the Prime Minister did it. So I would say that our federation is broken. And there is kind of a sense of lawlessness in the country, and people are very angry. Social media is going nuts. People expressing disquiet about what's going on and not wanting to comply and scared. Everybody's very, very afraid of losing their jobs. Not so much afraid of COVID, more afraid of losing their jobs and having the government tie them up in knots.
So it's all about violence. Gautam, hello.
Hello, ma'am.
We are just talking about the situation in Australia because we have somebody from Western and Eastern Australia here, and we're talking a bit politics.
Then that is not my domain.
That is not so your domain, I know, but just let's hear what's going on down there in Australia.
But then does politics interfere with the medical practice?
Yes, Patricia just said everybody is very afraid, and as we know, fear puts a lot of stress on the immune system, and that for all this violence and fear that's going on definitely is suppressive to the immune system and will lead to a dysfunctional microbiome, and that will lead us down the track to fungal infections.
But fear of the political decisions or fear of COVID itself?
Both. Yes. Not so much COVID, because COVID is not pandemic in Australia. It has never been. In fact, probably more people die of the flu in Australia on a yearly basis than have died of COVID. And even the ones who have died of COVID, they probably died with COVID and they had other comorbidities. So I'd say that the true COVID numbers here are probably quite low.
But then don't you feel that you're thankful to the strictures of the Australian government, which were introduced just at the onset of the COVID outbreak, wherein Australia cut off all incoming and outgoing flights immediately. So that was actually looked at as a very strong point at that point of the time. But then maybe that prevented and that saved you all from COVID miseries. Don't you feel that so?
Yes, it certainly has played a part. And I think people are grateful that that happened. But the fact that we are 7 states and we have been prevented from travelling in our own country has really annoyed people. That's the thing that we're not happy with.
But that's then with all, I think all the countries wherein as a common man or as a lay person or as a citizen, we might feel that this is the restriction of movements have caused these miseries. But then now the points have changed. Like India, after the second wave, people are expecting the third wave to come in. But presently, it looks more like like what I always say, governments across the world have learned how to earn from COVID. So they know what kind of funds that they can draw from WHO in the name of COVID. And that is what they have been using. So governments across the world are actually not concerned with the common man. They are only concerned with themselves and their own survival.
Yeah.
So therefore they tend to ape, or they tend to implement the third waves and the fourth waves and the variants. Wherein as homeopaths or as naturopaths, we very well understand that it is our immunity which is the culprit, which has been seen across since last year March. Since I think the FutureLink team again is to be given due credit, wherein all different lectures have been held and everybody has come down to the same consensus that the immunity plays the strongest point in succumbing to COVID. Because even before we actually suffer from any symptoms, we suffer from the mental fear, which itself kills faster than the disease. So I think here in homeopaths and naturopaths, they play a very important role in giving a healthier life to the patient and to our community around.
Definitely. We now have elections coming in Germany, and we will see that the promises of the government before the elections will be very different to after the elections. And already everybody knows about that, and people are making jokes around it.
But then everywhere it is the same thing.
Everywhere the same thing, definitely.
Like the name of the poison may differ, but then it is still lethal.
It's an interesting view that the poison in reality is the what we call agnostic, we call it the chief features of mankind, such as laziness and power, need of power and need of lust, and so on, so on, so on. This is the real toxic and the real problem, I guess.
I would just have one doubt. I'd like to know more about Brother Neil, because with Patricia, we are connected on LinkedIn, so I know that she's a naturopath. So for Brother Neil, I have not been able to assess his profession or his persona and such. So can you, sir, please introduce? I'll introduce myself. I'm Gautam Arora, and I practice homeopathy in India, in Mumbai, and I'm a psychotherapist also. So I deal with psychotherapy too. And presently, I am doing my LLB. I am doing my law, a degree in law. So
Wow.
last year, COVID times, we had a lot of time because, like, I had put a board outside my clinic: fear and fever patients don't come in, because ma'am, sir, we all were equally ignorant about this disease or this so-called virus,
Yeah.
because we all had a same teacher, the Google, the patient also and the doctor also. So we all relied on the same source of knowledge. So therefore, if the patients with fear or anxiety comes in, it will increase my anxiety. So I had put up a board outside my clinic: fever and fear patients, please don't enter the clinic.
Actually,
Because,
I saw a meme the other day that said fear stands for false evidence appearing real. I thought, yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
But then we all were ignorant. So last year I had a lot of time, so I prepared for my entrance. We have, for doing our law degree in India, we have to appear through a common entrance test, which shows our eligibility towards gaining admission. So I appeared for that. I scored well. And last year I took admission because all the lectures are online. Everything is online. So I could have managed it with my clinic. So therefore, I am doing my law. I have already completed 1 year, 2 more years to go. So
Great.
so so I would like to know about Brother Neil. Can you please help oblige me rather? They all must be knowing you.
Yeah, no, sure. Look, I introduced myself a bit more earlier, but I'm in Western Australia. I work with consciousness and a number of modalities associated with consciousness. Do a lot of psychotherapy work as well, Gautam, so like a similar overlapping field to yourself. I'm the inventor of a hypnotic machine. So I've been developing during the COVID, same thing, plenty of time on my hands. And I've long wanted to be able to hypnotize the brains outside of the head. So hypnotizing the head as a clinical hypnotherapist is reasonably straightforward. It's quite a simple thing to do. But hypnotizing, for example, the thorax, so all the neurology of the thorax is a much more complex process. And for most people, it's necessary to do very complicated, meditative processes. So, for example, the Heart Math Institute have perfected, many ways of actually hypnotizing the thoracic brain. What about the gut brain? What about the brain in the pelvis? And what about the brain in the spine? And so I did a lot of research in this. And the research led me on to, determine that it was possible to actually physically stimulate these neurological structures outside of the head in ways where you could actually drop them into an alpha-like state. So alpha is between 8 and about 7 and 9 hertz is the normal range that people talk about. But the alpha-like state of these other neurological structures around the body is quite different. So it has very, very different frequencies. So I developed a machine to do this because it was COVID and I was locked.
Good. So
I was locked up.
Adversity has been a teacher to all of us.
So it's been a wonderful time as far as I'm concerned, because I've had that opportunity to explore what has been my life's work, which is working with hypnotherapy and psychotherapy and so on. So that's my approach. I'm not a homeopath. I'm somebody with deep reverence for homeopathy as a treatment modality, and indeed In one of my books that I wrote about, this work that I'm doing, I talked about homeopathy and the way in which it was a suggestive medicine, which was the suggestions were largely being presented to the instinctive mind. So the instinctive mind is associated with the gut brain, so the abdominal brain. And it was really interesting to actually have a look at the way in which homeopathic remedies, like how they actually intersect with the being, like as a suggestion. So that's my rather outrageous introduction.
I have two similarities on what you may relate to. Like I believe in two concepts. Like I believe in whatever you say, but accordingly, like Patricia, most of my patients, like I would just come back to you. I believe in naturopathy and homeopathy. So when a patient comes to me, so I talk about the home remedies specifically. Mary, I have forwarded you a PowerPoint presentation now. So in that, I've spoken more about apple cider vinegar or turmeric or even alum or these kind of solutions to get rid of fungal infections. So we deal more with naturopathy. And coming back to you, brother, two things that I would relate to you with your therapy. Maybe you must be using it, but like what you said about frequencies. So every sound generates a particular kind of frequency, which caters to a particular part of your system. So we do use sound as a therapy to patients. Many frequencies being generated, so that can help. Like for example, a simple chanting of Om on a different parameter altogether can itself be soothing, relaxing, and in a milder way put across treatment for various kind of diseases. And second point that I would relate to you with is that aura therapy. Like each body or each physical structure, whether it is plant or animal or human being, they emit a particular aura. So that is what we correlate to the neurological existence of brain in each part of your physical being. So I'm very happy. Thanks, Mary, again, because the speakers, they tend to connect at a particular level. Like we never know, but the greatest architects sitting up there, they have brought us together, and you have been instrumental in that. I really, maybe it is your intuition about whom to get on the team or whom to get on board, which may not imbalance the existence of the other. There are no egos being bruised and no egos being catered to. So I again thank the team FutureLink. Really, I am very happy to meet all of you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as we're going down the track of frequencies and mind and guts, I think Patricia should talk a bit about birth and the importance of getting a good microbiome from the mother.
Yes, it's interesting. And there must be some kind of metaphysical connection between the role of Candida, especially in the grand scheme of things, because the baby is often exposed to it first in the birth canal. And certainly the colonization that occurs as the baby is on the mother's abdomen and crawls and finds its way to the breast is very significant, because the oral mucosa and the nasal mucosa is infiltrated then with a range of bacteria that are on the mother's skin, and they help to diversify the microbiome. But it's interesting that breast milk itself has a range of pathogens in it. I mean, Streptococcus, Candida albicans, E. coli. E. coli is really important in the milk in order to establish the proliferation of vitamin K in the gut. So these nasty things, we often see them as nasty things, must have a very beneficial role. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so significant and endowed upon the baby at the moment of birth. So it's a matter of balance, I think, because Candida will only proliferate if things get out of balance with that. And that's when we have to work with the gut to bring things back into balance so that the Candida just settles back in the gut where it does what it needs to do, rather than being more systemic and causing irritation and uncomfortableness.
Yeah. So it's the first minutes, first hour that is so important and makes such an impact.
Yeah.
And if we think of those poor babies who are born with a lot of distress by the mother, or a lot of distress between the parents, or even with the Caesar's section.
Yeah, the Caesar really does interfere. You know, they miss that step.
Yes.
But it's interesting too, and I'm talking about things being out of balance and the need to kind of look at the diet. I mean, you then have the added addition where a mother, if she's got postnatal depression or something's gone wrong and she's reaching for cake and custard and chocolate and these sorts of quick things, or she's maybe got a toddler or she's trying to balance work and a baby and she's not feeding herself well and she'll go for quick carbs. These sorts of things impact severely on the proliferation of the candida, and you have to get the protein up and the fat up and those anything with an OSE out of the diet. Otherwise, things are going to go to hell in a handbasket, that's for sure, especially if the baby's got systemic candida or the mother's got systemic candida in her breasts, and, you know, such that her nipples may even be nearly dropping off. It does come back to her having to really look very carefully at what she puts in her mouth by way of food in order for things to really settle.
I think for our listeners, we have to point out that when we see the candida surface on the skin, it's only the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because people usually don't know that. They think they put a cream on it and it's okay. But what we see on the skin is the tip of the iceberg, and the iceberg within the mother or the baby is the thing to care about. And this is where the fungus goes systemic.
Because that can impact on the lactation. If the baby has got a bad fungal infection in the mouth, it's not going to want to attach to the nipple well because the mouth is so sore. And, you know, you can certainly look in the baby's mouth and you may even see the fungus there on the tongue or at the back. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just red. But if the baby's clicking while the baby's at the breast, sometimes that's a sign that the baby has candida. And what they're doing is using their tongue to scratch the roof of the mouth with the nipple as they're feeding because it's itching. And then you think, okay, maybe there's some fungal infection here we need to deal with. So it can manifest in lots of different ways, but it can make life very uncomfortable for Bubba and also for the mother.
Neil, could you tell us a bit about the consciousness of the fungus? Because usually we only talk about clients, but we don't look at the fungus as a living being and a consciousness of its own.
Well, the interesting thing, you know, Dr. Gautam was asking me to introduce myself, and I talked about the development of the coherence device, as I call it. And no sooner had I actually developed this thing and I started using it, then I began actually getting into conversations with the candida of my body. And no sooner had I started doing that, than I began actually having conversations with the candida in my clients' bodies as well. And what came out of that was I had it like it was a shock. It was an absolute shock to me to actually recognize that there was a consciousness at the level of the collective that was sufficiently high enough to actually be able to have a communication with me. And so there was things that came out of it in all sorts of areas to do with candida and indeed other microflora issues as well. So like everybody else, you know, my clinic, I've had plenty of people come through my clinic who have got skin irritations or, you know, respiratory issues or reproductive issues in particular, but all kinds of digestive issues. And then you start getting into people who have got issues with, for example, their liver. And, you know, in my early conversations with Candida, which is the name of this book that I wrote about, you know, these literally thousands of client interviews that I did, what we were looking at in these conversations was the way in which they could actually participate in not only in a conversation. So like, how does a conversation go with a hive mind? That's an interesting question in its own right. And the hive itself, when it's actually in communication with you, is going to talk from the perspective of how a hive works. So, like, for example, they have no idea of hierarchy. They have no idea about the idea that one tissue in the body might be trying to actually put stress upon the hive of the candida. They can't understand the notion of separation and difference between the various tissues within the body. So that would be an example where the hive itself is completely at a loss as to trying to understand what the heck's going on, like what is going on. And as the interactions were going on in the work that I was doing, what became clear was that the candida hive was always trying to adapt to actually resolve what it saw as being a tension within a greater hive. So in the way of a fractal order of these sorts of things, the candida hive saw all of the cells of the body. So, for example, there's a whole overgrowth of them sitting in the mouth of a baby. You know, you're talking about Patricia. Then what the hive of the candida don't really see a separation between themselves and the cells of the mouth. And so they'll set about setting up conditions and circumstances which are most beneficial to the candida. So as we know, specific pH requirements, demand for certain sorts of foods which are assist them to proliferate, decline in the appetites for foods which won't assist them to proliferate, and so on and so forth. So that's what they're doing. They're actually manipulating their environment to make it more suitable for them to operate. That's because they don't see a difference between themselves and the other cells of the body. In therapy, what I was able to do was actually begin putting in suggestions to the candida, for example, because that's where we're talking at the moment. It's certainly not limited to only working with candida. But we talk to the candida and we say, well, look at what you're doing. Look at what's happening when you make these choices, when you make these decisions. Look what happens to the body. We would then show them all of the tissues of the body, the actual hierarchical structural nature of a human body, which is completely different to a hive. And a hive is absolutely flat. So it's one of the flattest sort of organizational structures you could ever imagine. And so what we would do is we would just actually try and explain hierarchy, explain structure to the candida. And then on the basis of that, dramatic results would occur. So the hive would actually go, aha, okay, I see what's happening is that we're dealing with a completely different type of organism. This is a structural organism that's got all this hierarchy, it's got all this differentiation in it. And what we need to do is actually adapt what we're doing, because one of the things that came out of it was very, very clear right from the very beginning. It's that the candida had no intention to hurt. So there's no intention to harm, there's a misunderstanding, and there's a failure of instruction. There's a failure of sharing of information. So I know, I do understand that my approach is novel and unusual, but where I'm coming from is that fundamentally we're dealing with an organism which they're all equal. All of the candida cells are equal no matter where they are in the body. And but they operate in very, very specific ways where they hear the evidence, the weight of evidence of the information that comes from, wherever the cells of the candida are within the body. And, just as you were alluding to there earlier, Marianne, the candida is pretty much in every tissue of the body. And Patricia, you were talking about this as well. There's almost no tissues of the body. In fact, the candida, when I started talking to them, they said to me, well, we've always lived here. I'm talking to them about, at this point, I just remembering a particular case where a person was dealing with nerve damage, where the nerves were entering and exiting from the spine, and a major candida infection. It was identified, like it's medically identified, that this is where this infection was. And when we actually talk about that, they start coming back and they're saying, well, this is what we thought we should be doing. Like we've been trying to actually operate with this great big hive, which is your body. And the instruction set that's coming to us is faulty, like it's faulty information that we're getting, and we're making, taking decisions which are, based on completely different, and, avenues of, well, the results are based on the different instructions. So as an example, we'll talk about that one. And I know I'm dominating. I will shut up in a moment. But,
no, not at all. Please continue. I'd like to speak about this before we start the lecture with people around. Please continue.
So one of the, in this case, the particular case that just flashed through my mind to talk to you about, to use as an example, was this where the nerves were actually entering and exiting from the spine, and the nerves actually coming from the gut. So these are, ones which are feeding and around the intestines. And we know that most of that, in terms of the intelligence of the, the gut brain, largely it's the vagus nerve connections is where it also is. But this is not the case that we're talking about. So we're not dealing with vagal nerve interactions. So these are literally nerve stems that are coming into the gut and actually in and around the gut organs. And the instruction set that the Candida were operating on was that we're being overwhelmed by all this denial structure that's going on. So, the denial is the aspect of the ego of the gut brain, of that gut mind, the instinctive mind. And the person had been really struggling with the issues around belief systems and all of this type of thing. So there's a lot of psychotherapy approaches going on. The Candida are listening into this, and they're saying, well, that's all right. What we'll do is we'll just shut down the communication flow of information that's going up that nerve. So once we started talking to the Candida hive throughout the whole body about what was going on, they could actually see that, well, okay, this wasn't really clear information. We were not getting clear information from the higher consciousness of the human. So that's an example. And there's many more. But anyway, yeah, sorry.
We are entering...
Mary, just a minute. Neil, it would be like, in short, telling about respecting the organism and understanding the presence of the Almighty or the divine energy in everything around us. So, like you're respecting that microbe organism, and you're talking to that organism, and then you're telling him that, okay, don't trouble me, coexist. So you can be helped by my organism, and at the same time, I can help you to flourish without you troubling me.
Absolutely.
So it is a very good concept, like respecting everyone. Even the organism has a energy in it. So if we believe in the divine presence, so we are believing in the divine presence in the organism itself. A very nice concept, sir. I appreciate that. I have never thought about this.
Well, that absolutely what came through with all of this work, Gautam. I had about 6 weeks where it was almost no clients that weren't actually focused on this territory. and I figured I was supposed to actually do this research and dig through it all. But you're absolutely right. It's actually being able to have respect and love and unconditional love for these organisms. But more importantly than just talking about an individual Candida cell, for example, is the hive. To actually be able to acknowledge and respect the hive, and that it is a consciousness of its own, of its own, and that it absolutely has a right to exist, and we should be cooperating and collaborating with it.
Neil, do you think that, I'm intrigued by your use of the word hive. It's got something to do metaphysically with what's going on with humanity at the moment, that there's a hive consciousness that's brought into the fear about what's going on and what is the right thing to do. And it's about giving up sovereignty in order to, take one for the team and do an effort for the greater good, or so we are told, which is probably a false way of thinking. Is this why fungal infections are taking off at the moment? Is it got something to do with what's going on with this kind of consciousness?
The hives, the actual hives, are tuned completely into that international hive of human. It's completely fractal. This is one of the things that absolutely was the extent to which these things were fractal. So we begin with a community of fungi. And then the next thing we're dealing with not only one community of fungi, but many communities of fungi which are operating together as a hive. And I'll never forget the day that I was actually sitting writing this book, and I started actually getting some communication coming from the Candida. And I said, what's going on? They said, oh, it's too hot. And at the time, it was really, really hot here in Western Australia. And I was sitting outside working on my computer, and they said, it's dry. And I'm scratching my head. I'm thinking, why? Why would you be talking about it being dry when you live inside, a person's, abdomen or whatever? How could it possibly be dry? And I went on like this for some time. It clicked. They were talking about what was going on for the fungus that were actually living in the soil.
Yeah.
And they were in.
Yeah.
So there was this community between the Candida and the body having a conversation or not seeing a differentiation. So they could not see separation between themselves, right, living around the roots of the tree. And it's a drought. So like it hadn't been raining for about 40 degrees centigrade, and it's really, really dry. And the Candida are talking to me about it. Oh, it's so dry.
I mean, that's one of the interesting things. If you're out in nature and you see little mushrooms and toadstools popping up here and there, that's what we see. But the reality is that underneath the soil, there's a huge substratum of connectedness that goes on that's humongous.
Patricia, you have a really interesting.
I just wanted to add one thing. That is the communication between the trees in a forest is due to the fungus beneath.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go on, Gautam. I just wanted to add that.
No, in the PP which I'll be sharing with you all, there's a paper presented in the American Society of Microbiology that global warming is one of the important causes of the Candida auris being flourishing. So I mentioned about this paper because the health threat by Candida, one of the types of Candida auris, the global warming is one cause, and secondly, the use of your earphones. Now, since last year, since March, everybody is online. So most of us have been using earphones and mobiles more often. So that is one more cause which has shown the increase of the Candida infection throughout the world.
Wow, that's so interesting.
It's dropping the life force, all this e-smog.
Because it certainly has got worse. I mean, it's 45 years now I've been working with mothers and babies. And like 40, 30 years ago, you never, ever saw Candida in the breast. But you're seeing it much more now in the last 20 years. It's become a real phenomenon where it wasn't before, which is unusual. What's changed?
Ma'am, I would like to share with you. When we have been working with our dermatologists over here for this infection in the breast and the nipples that you're talking about, the type of material used in your lingerie that has changed. So the wire bras and the strap bras that people have been using, the women have been using, the sports bras and all, that has been one of the cause which has been come down to as breeding grounds for fungus.
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah. Wouldn't help. Yeah, I can see that.
Definitely, and the wired ones especially.
Yes. So that is what some skin specialists and with whom I have been working on these kind of infections. So they have come down to this theory. If we are using cotton undergarments, so there is lesser chances of fungus being there. Whether it is men having the infection around the groin area or the women. So that is one cause that we have been looking into.
Yeah. Overheating and constriction, which is what Neil was just talking about with the communication outside. So it's obviously endemic, this issue.
Look, I think it's absolutely fascinating what you're talking about, that there's the global warming and climate change and that sort of thing impacting upon it. And then you've got that pressure. If you're talking about the modern pressure of, needing to be doing all things, Patricia's talking about, the mother having to juggle work and a toddler and the child. And, she didn't mention, but, maybe the father's not particularly present either. It's just everywhere you look, there's pressure. And from what I get when I'm working with these microflora, particularly these fungal ones, is that they respond to pressure. It arcs them up. They just get arced up, the whole thing. What I wanted to mention also was that, we're talking about this communication. Now, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of chemical communication going on within the body, and electrical. So we get electrical, electromagnetic, we get biophotons, all that type of thing. So the communication at a physical level is extraordinary within the body. When you start looking at the idea that the candida inside of my body could be having a conversation with the fungus living under the tree, it's now jumped out of the physical. We're no longer actually, well, I guess biophotons could be working, but that's not the problem. And if we're talking about the overwhelming stress worldwide that's going on, so like that hive stress of the humans, well, everything's operating off it. So I don't know if you, obviously Marianne's come from a veterinary background and as a homeopath, but what I've observed with animals, like domesticated animals, they're going crazy. Like it's just...
Definitely.
Yes. Because of the restriction in movement. Well, first of all, first reason is that they have been restricted. Like it is like human beings, like we have been restricted, and therefore that has caused a lot of stress. Similarly, the domesticated pets are also restricted in their normal activity. So that is what the stress that they are going through also.
Yes, but Gautam, also they take up the energies of the humans that are locked down in the houses.
Yes. They perceive that faster than us human beings.
Yes, and the anxiety of the humans shift to the anxiety of the animals, and the animals get aggressive or depressed. And usually the first thing that reacts is the microbiome, and they tend to fungal infections and to allergies, according to that.
It's interesting too with farming practices now, with sea farming and herding, there's a lot of constriction goes on, growing fish in cages in the ocean and small feedlots. What impact does that have on the microbiome of those animals as opposed to hunting, in the natural state, wild animals or animals that are able to roam freely? It's completely different. And that's how we used to get our meat and our protein food, and it's changed.
Mm-hmm. One thing why the fungal infections get more and more, and what we did not touch yet, we homeopaths, we go by the symptoms of the body. And what we do is enhance the life force in the body again. But our pure allopathic colleagues, what can they do? They have to use amphotericin B or other medications, topical or systemic medications that go against the fungus and against the life force of the bee.
Yeah, suppression.
So we all know once you get amphotericin B, liver and kidney damage is imposed and very, very close. And what then? Mm-hmm. We have a very interesting question from Gloria Miller. Gloria Miller wrote that things get very desperate in Niger when Norma, a gangrenous disease leading to tissue destruction of the face, the mouth, and the cheek, is getting more and more and more.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but it has to be in combination with all that we talked. Did one of you have a Norma case?
No, not me.
No.
I have not.
No.
So we only can tell Gloria that she needs to go by the symptoms and find the minimum.
Mm.
And not only that, we can look into the buccal, the washes with, again, alum in hot water. Plain alum in hot water can help with regards to any kind of cleansing agent and preventing the breeding ground for any further diseases.
Okay.
Turmeric, so even bicarbonate in water will change the pH.
Yeah. And turmeric also, turmeric itself, plain simple turmeric can help with the home remedies before it looks into any other picture.
Mm.
In homeopathic medicines, hydrastis and echinacea mother tincture can help with regards to these kind of cleansing.
And I would add calendula too.
Calendula also, yes.
Yeah. And there's another one too, pau d'arco. It's quite a specific for candida as a herb. Yeah.
Yeah,
if we have looked,
go
if
down to the mother tincture as well.
yeah, mother
Yeah.
tinctures with washes is fine. If you look into
Yes.
the broader aspect of fungus which is seen, then normally if we don't get to the simillimum, then you can look into hydrocotyle, you can look into gunpowder and graphitis. So all these in 30 potency, even rustox for that matter in 30 potency helps with majority of the fungal infections. But graphites 30 and gunpowder 30, they have given good results with fungal infections.
When I'm dealing with the breast pathologies, it's Halonius and borax are the two that are, especially Halonius, because a lot of women after they've given birth are in a sepia state, and Halonius is the next degraded state beyond sepia.
Yes.
And, you work with that and then get them back to sepia and then back to their constitution. But I find Halonius is a fabulous remedy postpartum when you've got fungal infections of the breast.
Why gunpowder?
Gunpowder, actually, it is more used as a, I would say, so-called specific or generally when medicines are not clearly indicated. So for one-sided diseases of fungal infection without any pathophysiology or without any constitutional involvement, gunpowder helps.
Okay. Gunpowder in itself is a very strong combination of
yes. Therefore all the more, like what I told you, when you said that you have to resort to constitution, so before she finds out the simillimum, you can look into these drugs to, I would say, palliate the case, and then you can go ahead with it. Because once the patient is comfortable with palliation, the patient is already hooked on to homeopathy. Because like when we say that pure allopathic friends, why do they gain is because we cannot give immediate palliative treatments to people who have fungal infections on face, or people who have fungal infections where cosmetically they would feel uncomfortable to face the society. If it is on a covered part, then the patient is fine with homeopathic treatment. But when it is on an exposed part, so the patient is already going through a lot of anxiety when he has to face society. So when we can at least relieve the patient with homeopathic medicines, so we get on the patient to hook on to homeopathy and trust on your practice. And then you can think about your constitution.
Yeah.
It's interesting you're using the word gunpowder to treat it when we're, humanity's at war at the moment. I mean, I find that really remarkable.
A lot of people that say we are in World War III.
Yeah, I believe it.
Realize it yet.
Ma'am, again on the principle of homeopathy, similia similibus. So
Absolutely.
World is at war, but then we still use gunpowder to cure it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, definitely. So very interesting. What I saw in Greece happening, we are still wearing the masks when we go
we are too.
places
yeah.
and shops and so on. At the moment, we don't have to wear a mask when we go at the sea or only on the street, not only a few people, not many people. But what I see is pimples on the face, red cheeks, cracks in the mouth. So I see that the flora on the face skin is very damaged.
Yeah.
And people are turning to fungal infections in that area too.
And also staph infections.
And staph, complicated on top.
Yeah. Well, the thing that they disinfect or the mask with is ethylene oxide, which is a carcinogen. They're not good things to put on the face. And I say to people, it's a bit like using chicken wire to stop an infestation of mosquitoes. That's about how effective they are when it comes to stopping viruses. It's crazy. There is no justification on any level that you look at for them doing anything apart from stopping us from communicating and lowering our immune system and just adding to the stress.
It's so. It's that way. I just wonder, do we have any other questions beside the Noma? Getting more in Niger? Thank you for the information. I did not know that. Can anyone, one of you, think why Noma in media is going astray? Do you get the consciousness of the Noma, Neil?
I'm just having a look at it, yeah. There's something sitting around desperation, something around the issues of desperation. And what I'm detecting is that the microflora there, and as you say, Dr. Gautam, it's not for certain that it's Candida. Could be a whole range of things actually in the infection. But there's this element of absolute desperation. Now that would be a hive-based thing. We were talking about of the hive experience. And it's like if we think about the consciousness of the face and that we're getting all of this injury to the face, we can't face what's going on. It's not being able to face it. It's exactly what you're talking about, that when people have got an infection on their face, you look for those palliative or the first aid type of approaches. This business of being able to at least be able to be presentable in public is the last line of humanity, and that desperation is that we're even losing that. It's that's what the consciousness is. That's where the consciousness is. Desperation and not having any resources to actually face the world.
It's interesting because when you're out in society, say just even at the shops, and you might be going up and down an aisle and you catch someone's eye, the instinct is to smile at that person, even if you don't know them. But now you feel yourself smiling, but they have no idea. It's terribly sad.
Mm.
We've lost our humanity.
Yeah.
Yes.
This has always been the topic with the Arabian countries and the burqa.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
It's coming back to Afghanistan now.
Mm.
We're losing a lot by that.
Yeah.
And when we are talking about the damaged face, losing the face, the same happens with the mukormykosis. When you get the eyes infected, the mouth infected, and yes, we all know that it looks terrible. People are losing the eyeballs with the systemic fungal infection. Gautam, do you want to say something about that?
Like if you look into the causes again, the immunosuppressant, that is what is the cause. When the immunity is suppressed with these kind of infection, whether it is any virus or any other cause, virus or stress, that itself has caused a suppression of the immunity. And we have always seen that all kind of fungal infections, they have been thriving on incompetent immunities. So when we talk about incompetent immunities, that can be, the cause can be anything with regards to drug induced or a person on its own. And then we have seen, like when we talked about COVID, the rampant use of multivitamins and vitamin C especially has been advised. And if you go into the study of fungus itself, that also comes back to vitamin B complex, C, and magnesium. The three tissue salts that we look into is your B complex, your magnesium, and vitamin C, which helps us to combat this viruses or this this kind of fungal infection and viruses both. So here both have been the cause. Viruses causing a suppression of the immunity, and that is what is helping the breeding ground of the fungal infection. Now coming back to Brian, I would like to talk on this grounds. When you say that, when you spoke to the contagion and when you spoke to the microbe, and you when you spoke to that and you talked about a concept about the desperation and the functioning of that microbe. So here I would like to put in, you can relate it to this concept of yours. By relating it to your concept, when the immunity is suppressed, the normal tissue nucleus and our cell, the living body cell, is not functioning. That is what is then the previously, when in a healthy state of physical existence, our cells are functioning in the healthy way and the contagion is also functioning. But because our vital energy is more, we cannot perceive the existence of the functionality of that microbe. But when our cells stop functioning in immunity, when immunity is suppressed, that is where the microbe function is then observed or perceived. It has always been functioning. It is like in homeopathy, we say that the stronger similar stimulus will suppress the weaker one. So when the sunlight comes in, the stars are not visible. So the sunlight here in this example is our normal healthy cells, which are functioning with a lot of vitality. And the stars are those microbes which are always with functioning, but which are not perceived and which cause no harm to our physical self because our normal healthy cells are functioning. But when this immunity is suppressed by whether virus or steroids, that is when these microbes, the sunlight is covered by a cloud of steroid, and these microbes which have been functioning as stars, they show their action. So that is where the function of the fungal infection, they come up because the vital force has already been suppressed by the use of steroids. Then these microbes take over and the pathology. We cannot believe that only since 1.5 years, mukormykosis or black fungus is seen. It has always been there, but which has not shown its or reared its head because of our immunity taking over and preventing the expression of these diseases. So coming back to that concept of immunity is to be tackled with, everything else will stand its forte, but our human immunity, once it is catered to and fortified, all these expressions go away. Whereas the black fungus gone now, suddenly it is out of news. Why? Why is that so? Anybody thinking on that level? Everything is same. COVID is still there, comorbidity is still there, centers are still there, patients are still admitted, but suddenly black fungus is gone. Because by world opening up, people's stress level, it decreases. So people are now more positive. People, community across the world are looking into more positive things coming up. Business houses have opened up. Financial insecurity is now relieving itself. Share markets across the world are improving. So people are coming down to their normal, healthy state of mind. So immunity going up, no other expression seen.
I think we have to add in that a fungus usually grows in the dark, in the cold, and in the moist climate. But this is true to the soul too.
But ma'am, in India presently we have a rainy season going on and dampness is still there, moisture is still there. Even if you take up with the patient, when the patient is admitted, even with the mask, the salivation and the expiration itself gives a breeding ground to this fungus. So all the protocols have still been maintained. The normal travel in India is still not started. So all the forces remain the same. The intensity may be reduced by say 10 or 20%. But suddenly the black fungus is out of news and out of coverage. Maybe again we come back to one concept that we have talked about in a previous thing, the pharma industry. The big pharma mafia has made its mark, has given the drugs, and now it is withdrawn into next phase of their attack. Maybe they are coming up with something new. Mm-hmm. So the bigger players are something else, and we talk here, patients suffer, deaths occur, and something else has to be blamed then. Because everything from day one, which was claimed to be a cure for COVID, they have themselves rebuked that theory. May it be medicine, may it be hydrochloroquine, whatever drug of choice they have mentioned. Again, after 6 months or 8 months, they say, no, that is not the thing. Remdesivir, in India, it has been black marketed. Like a 4,000 rupees drug has sold off at 45,000. Like maybe 10 times or 20 times the drug is sold. And now after some months or a few months back, they said that, no, this is not the drug of choice.
It comes down to money.
Yeah, players around the world, the pharma giants.
It seems with money you can buy everything, even a fungal disease. Just need to buy enough cake.
But yes, the breeding grounds are there, and immunity has to be looked into with regards to naturopathy or social, or say the consciousness, talking to your conscious self. And that is what goes into the mind training techniques. So like auto suggestive therapy. So you talk to your own self and you talk to your own individual cells, and that is what you bring it up to, rear it up to a functional existence, wherein coexistence with the microbe, allowing the microbe to symbiosis within your own cell, but like a pet, allowing him to be there with you but not causing you a trouble.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I've observed when since I've been doing all of this work is that the tissues of the body. So like, in traditional medicine, say, for example, Chinese medicine or Ayurveda for that matter as well, there's a complete understanding that the tissues have a consciousness. So an organ has a consciousness, a muscle has a consciousness. So this is not news. I understand it's not news what I'm talking about. But when you actually get in there and you start working with suggestion directly to a tissue type, all of a sudden you become aware of the tissue in its hive mind level. And so you've got these interactions between, a hive. So for example, in the mouth, we're looking at the tissues of the mouth. We can, break it right down into that, say, for example, the salivary glands or however you want to look at just the epithelial cells of the mouth, for example. They behave like a hive. And when you address them as a hive and you actually talk about the higher consciousness of this collection of cells, and you get them into a communication directly with, for example, a candida, which is the focus of a lot of the talk today, then you immediately escalate the understanding. And what we're terming the immune function really is, do we have the communication tools? Are the communication tools actually available for the interaction between the microflora and the tissue cells? And, it isn't like 99 times out of 100, it's not about actually having a big battlefield. It's not. It's actually about opening a communication.
Yeah.
And it's directly can be done at that level.
It's about balance.
It is about balance, yeah. But it's that respect for the tissue, respecting the tissue, and having the candida respect the tissue. And they'll do it. They know to.
One of the functions of candida in the body is to enclose heavy metals like mercury and save the body from the bad effects from it. This is why the body keeps the candida. Or candida is able to dissolve the plaques of carbohydrates in the venous system, at the valves. They usually are carbohydrates, plaques, and then the valves get inflamed. And the only thing that can eat up those carbohydrate plaques is the candida. So this is
very
what
useful.
keeps it.
There's so much about the microbiome that we just do not understand. It's an exciting, new horizon.
But on the other hand, if they overgrow, especially in the gut, and then crawl up the nerves, they can really damage the spine in causing spondylitis. We see that in dogs a lot.
Okay.
In humans as well. It's one thing why in elderly persons the nervous system and the sciatic nerve doesn't work that good anymore, because in reality it's infections with candida, and we don't think of it in our therapies. As homeopaths, we can catch it As allopaths, we can't catch that. With mental technique, you can catch it. With TENS therapy, you can catch it. With sauna therapy, but not with the normal allopathy. Gautam?
I have a query to Patricia. See, they say that with fungal infections, you have to avoid milk and milk products. But at the same time, use of probiotics have been used for getting rid of certain kind of fungal infections. The question will be common to both Patricia and Neil. When you talked about the brain, gut brain. So does probiotic enhance the gut brain to help us as a physical being? And Patricia, does probiotic, have you seen in your cases, probiotics have been used to combat fungal infections? Because most
Certainly,
of the
prebiotics and probiotics both are very important in keeping things in balance. But when it comes to human milk or milk in general, they are high in lactose, which of course is a sugar. So that's an inflammatory product that's not so appropriate. But when you do the extraction and do the fermentation, you're dealing with another aspect of that original source of material or nutriment.
Gautam, this is why we veterinarians use the effective microorganisms that have been invented in Japan.
Okay.
And are used in agriculture. We use them internally in animals and have a lot better effects than only using this omnibiotic and things like that.
Neil, can you throw some light on my query?
I can talk directly about the conversations I've had with the Candida. And one of the things is that they recognize once they begin to interact with the human at the sort of higher level of consciousness, they begin being able to actually handle, modes of communication and so on, which are surprising. And one of the things that came out of that was that they know when we're trying to kill them off with, some kind of drug. They know when we're trying to actually change them with their diet. They know when we're trying to change them with the probiotics and or prebiotics and all the rest of it. And the answer that I got continuously was, why don't you talk to us? Why don't you talk to us about what we should be doing? That was the answer, Gautam. I know that I'm going right out on a limb here with what I'm talking about, but the view from the microflora is that they know once you've got this communication running, then they know what you're doing. They know your intention. They can read your intention, and they understand that they're not liked or they're hated, and so they react in these ways that you might expect. It's like an elevation or an escalation in the consciousness of the hive, and it begins to start taking on the attributes of the human. Now, we do have some, I must admit, when I first started recognizing this, I thought I was going completely crazy. But then I realized that I'd seen something similar with domesticated animals. And domesticated animals take on, the psychology of the humans that are around them, tremendously so. So anxiety and depression and, violence and, all of those kinds of things that we would think of as being, descriptors of a psychiatric nature, a pet will pick those up all the time. And so when I started thinking about that, I thought, well, why wouldn't a hive mind actually acquire the psychology of the human? And that's what we're seeing. And of course, when we're talking about what was going on there with the facial infections, that's along the lines that we're talking about. It's just literally, it's not the consciousness of the microflora that's causing the problem. It's actually the consciousness of the human. So that's my long answer to your short question. But it's
But still, I have a question to your answer. So if they tell you that why have you not spoken to us, after that you must have definitely spoken to them. So
yes.
what is their defense about the mischief that they cause in the human organism?
The first thing is that you get this perplexed aspect. So they're completely perplexed. What do you mean we've been causing?
Like if their host, like if I have this infection, so I am their host. They are the guest in my system. So they are cohabitating here. So if my query to them is that if I am feeling restless, or maybe if I am having itching, or like we can take a commonest expression is itching. So if I have itching in my throat, or if I am itching in the buccal mucosa or on the skin due to their presence, so what can I do to help them in not giving me this restlessness?
Okay, it's a couple of steps. And I was trying to actually answer that question, but I obviously went off on another direction. But the first thing is you ask them, what is it that you're actually, what instruction set are you operating on? So what do you believe the situation to be at the moment? What do you think the communication is? So you have to get clear on how they're thinking, what it is that they think that they're doing, how they think that they're actually collaborating and cooperating with the human tissues. So that's the first question. The second question, or second answer, should I say, is that you then need to show them that how they're interpreting the information is an error. So there's an error in the way that they're actually interpreting the information, presuming that there is actually an error. And then the third element of it is that you talk to them about the impacts of it. So we look at all the causality. So, you know, when you're getting this information, you're interpreting it in this way, you then go and do this, and this leads to the difficulties with the tissues. Then the fourth step is that we actually look for some change. So we get into a conversation with it. So I've you know, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I've had, well, literally since I started doing this work, there would be many, many hundreds. And for somebody working in my field, that's a lot of patients. So like I understand homeopathy, you see many, many more patients than I do. You know, most of my sessions are an hour and a half per person. But I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people with all kinds of fungal infections, and we've been able to get into this dialogue and the infection is managed. Not 100%, 100%
Very
case.
impressive. Very impressive.
Good that you could get patients who could function on your wavelength of your thought process. Because in here, we may even people to still perceive homeopathy as a primary line of defense is difficult. Forget naturopathy, forget any other pathy except allopathy. Now, after COVID, I would say that has helped people to look into beyond allopathy. And now people have started catering themselves to primary line of treatment as homeopathy or Ayurveda or naturopathy. Because after the worldwide use of arsenic 30 with regards to COVID, which was again a misconception. So after that, people have understood their importance of immunity, and they have realized that how can allopathy suppress that immunity, and other kinds of pathy, especially naturopathy, I would say only naturopathy rather, can improve their immunity without interfering with day-to-day life. Then the turmeric milk has always been a part of Indian families or Indian households since years and ages, since the time of Ayurveda. So now people have woken up rather to this use of turmeric and other kind of concoctions which have been used, and definitely the essential oils which have shown the results in relaxing the human body and therefore relaxing the mind. I agree to your concept of talking and understanding that what is the problem and why are we facing the problem and how can that microbe help us to do it.
One of the interesting things in here is that if we set the intention that, say, for example, a naturopathic approach, so we're going to apply some nutrition, we're going to supply supplements and these types of things. If we set the intention that this food, this nutrition, this whatever else it is that we're doing is going to be, it's being taken for the purpose of setting a new balance, then you get a completely different
Got to be helpful to both sides.
Absolutely. So when it's not, we're trying to kill you guys, it
Right.
changes totally.
Well, that's what the nystatin does. I mean, that's about the killing. But I mean, when we're looking at the naturopathic or homeopathic approach, it really is about trying to find a balance. It's more subtle.
Far more. Yeah, I agree.
And if you look at the old wise women approach, an old Russian woman would go for feeding a patient like that beetroot.
Okay.
Beetroot soup, beetroot salad, beetroot made in the oven. So the candida would get a bit of sugar, but at the same time the intestines get cleaned a lot.
Right.
So it's
And beetroot is high in iron, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not very.
Yeah. Interesting. I like
So
borscht.
you would
Patricia,
drop all the cereals and things like that, and you would go for the roots.
I would like to know your experiences with apple cider vinegar in candid infections.
Look, I don't prescribe it, but I know a lot of patients will do it themselves, and they will have apple cider vinegar before meals. But certainly it has its place. Absolutely it does, because it changes the pH. Yeah.
And it also helps, like if you take up coexistence, like to maintain the balance. So then it definitely doesn't kill, like what Neil said, doesn't kill the microbes, but at the same time enhances the immunity of the person and helps to maintain the pH balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody wins. That's what it's about.
And if you go back to how this vinegar is made, you again need a microbiome, and you need hives, and you need fungus.
Fermentation.
Yeah. It's just like sauerkraut. You need all those little guys to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the information of those little guys still is in it.
It's a rich tapestry.
So you send their friends back again inside to talk to them and to cohabit.
One of the interesting things is that many of the microflora, for example, in yogurt or something like that, so a fermented type of product, the great majority of them actually get killed off in the stomach. So they don't make it into the gut at all. And yet the intention of the person taking it goes all the way. So, you don't have to have live cultures making it all the way through the digestive process. All you need is the intention to be there. And so we're back at, how homeopathic remedies work. Where's the intention? The energetic situation with the intention. It's so clear.
Yes, Neil, but the body gets the information the moment that food is in the mouth.
Absolutely. That's the point. So like it's a physical suggestion. We're talking when you take that particular food, whether it's sauerkraut or whatever else, the ideas are actually sitting in the mouth at that point. Even when you're looking at it on the plate, you can smell it. The ideas are coming.
Yeah. This is another thing, whether it is this apple cider vinegar or a good Italian balsamico or pear vinegar from Austria or kimchi or sauerkraut or miso soup, the moment you smell it, you're happy. Just makes you happy.
Yeah, very good.
That is a nice glass of wine, Marianne. It's fermented.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day, Neil.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Fermented with lemon milk in other countries. So each country has its specialty to work with those little guys to make exceptional food.
I wonder what it is in Australia. I think it's beer. It would have to be beer. I don't know that we have any national dish, but we do make good beer here. and certainly boutique breweries which ferment popping up everywhere. But
We have to talk about that beer from a Bavarian point of view.
oh yes, it's the best beers in Europe. Yes, I agree. I agree. Oh, dear.
In like when we talk about this toenail fungus, in India, people have been using a Vicks vapor rub, like plain Vicks
Oh, yeah.
vapor rub to be applied on the part, and that has helped to relieve. But then, like not according to the concept of Neil, not cohabitate, but to kill the fungus. So now, then after that, the research showed that menthol and peppermint they help to relieve the sufferings or symptoms of fungus infection. And
Here
then
they
later,
use tea tree, Gautam. They use tea
tea
tree, same thing.
Tea tree. Then later on, the other oils which were which were shown to have helped the relieving factors or the palliative mode was lemongrass, chamomile, tea tree, and menthol basically, and one more was there. Wait, I'll show you. Eucalyptus oil or eucalyptus massages and eucalyptus cleansing agents were used to relieve these symptoms of candid infections. So even smelling or that aroma of the eucalyptus oil, that helps us to relieve. So with black fungus also, eucalyptus oil was kept on the pillows or the headrests of patients, and throughout the night when the patient used to smell eucalyptus, that used to relieve him of the sufferings of black fungus. In some cases, we had used that.
Yes.
That can be taken as the people who, the antagonists of homeopathy or these kind of naturopathy, that it was just giving a feel-good factor on the mind of the patients by inhaling eucalyptus oil. But then whatever said and done, it worked.
The Russians do that a lot.
Yeah.
Use the eucalypt oil. My dear speakers, we are hitting the end. May I ask you for a resume or just what you want to, an impulse you want to give to our listeners? Ladies first, of course.
I think we have shared everything with regards to our concepts about and approaches to that. If listeners have a query with regards to particular speakers, then we will be able to shed more light on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
It's been a great conversation. I appreciate the opportunity of sharing my crazy ideas with you all. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone.
It's been very interesting. I have really enjoyed actually the conversation and the little byways and highways that we travelled. It's given me something to chew on, and I hope so for the listeners. So thanks, everybody.
We all have a crazy side to ourselves, brother. It is just we need somebody to cater to it. So I think you have helped us to delve into our crazier side by the concept that you have shared with us. It has been a very good enlightenment, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, definitely. And I just was thinking of doing another talk on fungal infections, but inviting somebody who knows more about the fungus in the forest and inviting somebody who knows about treatment of fungus in plants.
Yes.
Very interesting.
With plants also, Mary, you will know that with plants also homeopathic medicines have helped with fungal infections.
Yes, definitely.
So even the same mother tinctures like hydrastis and echinacea in water, when you spray over the plants, the fungus they reduce to effect, or adverse effect of the fungus on plants is seen, because it helps in growing the healthy cells also and to reduce in the fungal infestation of the plants.
I tried to get our Japanese colleague on the talk because she's working with the microbiome in the soil to get the plants so healthy that they don't need any treatment at all. I'm thinking of Tarako Yui. She is working on another solution of effective microorganism for the human being. And she added in a microorganism that even helps us to sustain radioactivity.
So again, coming back to the concept of meal, where are the microbes placed and what function they do? Like how do they function? Like now if you see the horticulturist, she is talking about the research of the microbe in the soil to grow a healthier plant so that no other infection is there. But if the same microbe is then seen on the leaf or on the fruit, that is what we call as the infection. So the position changes. So the action or the effect changes of the same microbe. When it is in the soil, it is enhancing the healthy plant. And if the same microbe is there on the leaf or on the stem or on the fruit, it is what is then requiring treatment.
It means things have got out of balance, and that's what the big issue is.
Balance, yes.
Mm.
So we're back to the old Gnostic concept of balance. Okay, my dear speakers, thank you very much for this Sunday live talk. I hope to see you again soon. And I wish you a very nice Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you all of you. Bye. Bye all of you.